President of Kosovo indicted for war crimes. Prosecutors at The Hague claim he and a former intelligence chief are responsible for almost 100 murders. Israel set to push ahead with the annexation of the occupied West Bank. Europe, Arab countries and the UN say it will be a hammer blow for peace talks, but the US gives the green light. And 2 months of COVID-19 progress wiped out in the United States as cases rise dramatically in the southern and western states, threatening to overwhelm hospitals. Welcome to the France 24 newsroom in Paris. I'm Alexander Orcott. Now, the president of Kosovo has been charged with 10 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity for his role in the country's 1990s conflict. The indictment alleges Hashim Thaci and the wartime intelligence chief Kadri Veseli are responsible for nearly 100 murders, as well as the disappearances and persecution and torture of hundreds of Kosovo Albanians, Serbs, Romas and political opponents. The indictment has pushed Thaci to cancel a planned meeting with Serbian officials at the White House on Saturday for stalled peace talks. For more details, here's Emerald Maxwell.
Hashim Thaci long ago shed his radical roots to cut a respectable figure on the international stage as Prime Minister and then President of Kosovo. But now his past has caught up with him. He's been charged with 10 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity by a court in The Hague investigating misdemeanors by guerrillas during Kosovo's 1998 to 1999 War of Independence. Thaci, who's always denied any wrongdoing, last year said that he would, if necessary, cooperate with the tribunal. Thaci has now pulled out of a Saturday meeting with Serbian officials to jumpstart their stalled peace talks. US presidential envoy Richard Grenell, who'd invited both parties to Washington for the discussions, said that he respects Thaci's decision not to attend until the legal issues of those allegations are settled. The court's indictment also extends to 9 other former separatist fighters, including former parliamentary speaker Kadri Veseli. It alleges that Thaci, Veseli and the other charged suspects are criminally responsible for nearly 100 murders against victims of Kosovo Albanian, Serb, Roma and other ethnicities, as well as political opponents. Thaci was a leader in the paramilitary Kosovo Liberation Army, which fought Serbian nationalists during the Kosovo War. When the conflict ended, Thaci permanently swapped that for Kosovo's political scene, which he has dominated ever since. The tribunal said that it has decided to make the charges against Thaci public because of his repeated efforts to obstruct its work, adding that he'd put his own interests ahead of his victims, the rule of law, and the people of Kosovo.
The United States has given the green light to Israel to annex Palestinian land, while the UN, along with European and Arab nations, have all said this will be a major blow for peace in the region. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to begin the annexation of the occupied West Bank in a week's time. Iris Makler tells us more.
What we see is Benjamin Netanyahu driving this, perhaps because he can, perhaps because he thinks this is the time, this is the administration that will let Israel take this step. And he will try to take that step, even if it is with all the pressure that is coming in on him from the rest of the world. We are hearing from the Palestinians that there may be violence. We're hearing internationally, we're hearing warnings of the same thing, including from the United Nations tonight. We are hearing the possibility from European leaders, for example, of embargoes on Israel. It's going to affect the relationship. It's going to affect the prospects of any future peace deal, and that's why so many European leaders and indeed other international leaders are against it.
France 24's Iris Makler reporting from Jerusalem. Well, moving on now to our coverage of the global pandemic, and in the United States, health officials are warning that 2 months of progress have been wiped out. In its latest figures, 34,700 new COVID-19 cases were recorded in a single day. The overall total now above 2.4 million, with over 120,000 deaths. The infections continue to fall in early hotspots like New York, which has nonetheless cancelled November's marathon, while states in the south and west continue to worsen.
It's going the wrong way, and we're very close to overwhelming our hospitals in terms of the number of beds and also the number of ICU beds. That's not a good place to be at all. And we're not the only state in this position.
And people got complacent. People got a little bit overly confident in our ability to manage, more normally. And people started to act like it was summer. They started to act like they wanted to go back to parties and do lots of big things like that. And it's coming back and it's biting us, quite frankly.
Well, for more details on the situation in the United States, I spoke a little earlier to France 24's Washington correspondent, Ketevan Gorjestani.
If you listen to the White House and the Trump administration, they're saying that the number of cases and the rise in the number of cases is linked to increased testing. But what experts are saying, and what most of them agree on, is that, yes, more testing means possibly more cases, but really the real reason why we're seeing these spikes is because there is community spread. That means that the virus is spreading across the United States, and they're saying that mostly it is linked to some states reopening too early and too quickly. And they're now also pointing the finger that we heard a little bit in one of those soundbites that we just heard, pointing the finger at mostly younger people who are going out now that economies have reopened and who are maybe being a little bit careless. And so you have some governors who were initially eager to reopen very early, like the governor of Texas, who reopened in early May. He's now coming out and urging people to stay home if they don't have to go out, urging them to wear masks, urging them to wash their hands, to socially distant. And he warned that he did not want to do it and that this would be the last resort. But he mentioned the talk about a new lockdown, which really gives you an idea of how dire the situation is in Texas specifically. But experts are worried about more than just these three states. They're worried about half of U.S. states who are seeing increases in their weekly average, and about a dozen states who are seeing increases of more than 50%. So it's really a difficult situation, and the tables have really turned, because meanwhile, the former hotspots that we saw in the Northeast, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, they've now decided to protect themselves from the high-risk areas. They've announced a new travel advisory requiring people coming in from those states with high infection rates to now self-quarantine for 14 days in order to not spread the virus in these states where they seem to have, at least for now, successfully managed to flatten the curve.
Now, the case against him was slammed shut last August, but a probe into the French president's chief of staff has now reopened. The anti-corruption association Anticorps has succeeded in its civil complaint, with the organisation accusing Alexis Kohler of conflict of interest because of his ties to a shipping company. Emmanuel Macron's office says the reopening of the case is just the automatic consequence of that civil complaint. Thomas Waterhouse explains.
Did the French president directly get involved in a judicial procedure last year to help his right-hand man? This latest scandal centres around a personal note penned by Emmanuel Macron last July to Alexis Kohler, his current chief of staff, but also a close former colleague at the finance ministry. At the time it was sent, Kohler was accused of concealing his family links with the managers of the Swiss-Italian shipping company MSC. The company receives public funds, and rumour had it that Kohler could have played a part in the dishing out of that money. A criminal investigation was opened by French prosecutors for conflict of interest before Macron sent this on the 1st of July.
Dear Alexis, I had already been informed of your family links with the controlling shareholders of MSC.
The website Mediapart claims the sending of this letter very quickly changed the course of the entire probe, which was wrapped up in August last year with no conflict of interest being found. The President's office has meanwhile been ironing out some wrinkles.
Ce courrier, je préfère le préciser, a été rédigé sur un document libre, sans en-tête de la présidence de la République, afin d'éviter toute confusion.
The opposition, though, says Macron acted unconstitutionally.
Même s'il intervient avec un courrier qui signe de sa main en tant qu'ancien employeur, il est président de la République.
The Élysée Palace insists that Macron's aide has done nothing wrong, with the president's office also stressing that judges will handle take 2 of this probe with full independence.
And that's the end of this edition. Stay tuned for more updates here on France 24.